Welcome everybody. Welcome everybody to this talk today organized by the Genealogy Society. My name is Ronnie Tan, and may I invite Mr. Ng Yu Kang, President and Founder of the Genealogy Society.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for turning up for this talk by Ms Aljunied. We are very privileged to have her to talk about the genealogy of the Arab. Many of us really doesn't have much knowledge of the Arab community in Singapore, less so about their genealogy. And Ms. Zara is going to tell us a lot about the genealogy of Arab. And one unknown fact is that for the Arab family, the Aljunied, every generation they have appointed a genealogist to keep record of the genealogy of the society. So they have full records for many generations. This is something which is very unknown to us. And many of us really do not have much knowledge of our own genealogy. Many of us don't even know where our ancestors came from. So the Genealogy Society is formed to help propose to Singaporeans that you should start looking at your family history now, because if you don't do, a lot of information are going to be lost with the passing of the older generations. And by the time you are interested, you do not have much information. So we have been approached by many people who wanted to trace their roots, but could not tell much about their ancestral roots. They have very broad idea. Say, if you are a Chinese, you say, I am from Fujian province. The Fujian province is much bigger in Singapore, many times bigger in Singapore. How do you go and locate your ancestral village? So unless you are able to pinpoint to the town, the city, the village, then we are able to help you. So the point is that do try to talk to elderly members of the family. Find out as much as you can before they become either senile or gone. So capture all this information. You may not have the time to write your family history now, but at least you had the information in hand. So by the time you want to write, you have enough information, or we can help you find more information to write your family history. So you are welcome to join us, the Genealogy Society of Singapore. We had a pool of members like Ms. Zara, who are very experienced with their genealogy, and there are a lot of experience accumulated by the membership. So if you are interested to know either your roots, or you want to write at least a brief history of your family, not tracing too many generations back, but at least a few generations who are in Singapore. We can guide you, we can help you to do this, and we can share experience with you so that at least you are able to talk to people who had the experience. So you are welcome to join us. Our life membership fee is a one-time payment of $200 now, but it's going to be restored to our normal, the fee of $300 with effect from 1st April. There are some introduction of the society outside there with application form, so you're welcome to avail yourself to the information. Thank you very much.
Okay, so now we can proceed to the talk without wasting any time. May I introduce Zara Aljunied to talk about the Arabs.
Assalamualaikum. Thank you, Ronnie, and good afternoon to all. Firstly, I'd like to thank Genealogy Society Singapore for giving me the opportunity to share this topic, which is close to my heart. Okay, what's behind the name Aljunied? To answer this question, I will approach in two different ways. This would be my sharing points. Okay, one way is I will look into the genealogy of the Alawi family because the name Aljunied itself is a subset of the many family names under the Alawi family. And secondly, the last part of my talk, I will look into the Aljunied family. Is rather my own personal experience in tracing my roots. Now, members of the Alawi family originally came from Yemen. This is just to share with you where Yemen is, which is on the southern part of Saudi Arabia, part of the Arabian Peninsula. And this is where Hadramaut is. Currently it's in Yemen, but Hadramaut is more on the southern part of Yemen. I think some of you may hear that there are wars in Yemen, but the southern part of Yemen is not where the war is. The war is mainly on the northern part of Yemen. Okay? And the people of the northern Yemen and southern Yemen, they are actually quite different. Sometimes some of the Hadramis, we don't want to say that they are from Yemen, but they are from Hadramaut. So they say they are Hadrami. Okay, this is the supra family tree of the Alawi family. I have brought some of the samples here. Maybe later after the talk, you want to come to front and look closer at all this. Okay. Okay, this is the main family tree. If you can see here, that is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. And all the way up the tree are all the descendants of Prophet Muhammad. And for the Alawi family, if you can see that this person, his name is Alawi. And he is the grandson of Prophet Muhammad's 10th descendant, whose name is Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir. I will discuss about him in detail later. So I mentioned about Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir. He is the 10th descendant of Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and he migrated to Hadramaut in the year 929. Those of you who are familiar with the history of Islam, after Prophet Muhammad passed away, there's the period where the caliphate ruled. And the 4 caliphate in Islam, the last caliphate was actually Prophet Muhammad's cousin as well as son-in-law. So the Prophet's descendants are mainly from him, the 4th caliphate, who is Ali bin Abi Talib. Okay, so throughout the caliphate period, the center of the administration was in Medina, in Saudi Arabia. But the last caliphate, Caliphate Ali, had shifted the capital of the administration from Medina to Basra in Iraq. So that's why his descendants, like Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir, were from there. But over the years, there were many troubles, or there were wars within the tribes that happened in Basra after the end of the caliphate period. So Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir was thinking of moving his family and his close relative to other parts, in the Middle East. So first he went to Medina, actually. There were about 70 of them, his close relatives and friends, and then they moved to Makkah. Then in Makkah, that's where they met pilgrims from Hadramaut. So they were like inviting him to come to Hadramaut. So that's where he decided to move to Hadramaut. Okay. So actually Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir, the word al-Muhajir itself in Arabic means the migrant. Because remember, he migrated from Basra in Iraq to Hadramaut. So he was the first to migrate to Hadramaut. So when he arrived in Hadramaut, his claim that his family were descendants from the Prophet were challenged by the local. So he had to then prove himself, showing all his documents and all his family trees. But the people in Hadramaut also had started to research on him by asking pilgrims that came from Basra in Makkah. So the people from Hadramaut who also went for pilgrimage in Makkah, they were asking about these Iraqi pilgrims about Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir. So after it was established that it was correct that his family was were descendant from the Prophet, then some of the descendant of Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir then decided that they must do something to make sure that all the kind of question that they receive when they first arrive in Hadramaut will be something that they can respond to. And one of the other things that they wanted to do was to establish a lifestyle that is as what had been enjoined by the Prophet. Because one of the reasons that Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir migrated to Hadramaut away from Iraq, because he found that the lifestyle in Basra, the lifestyle had changed, not like the lifestyle that the Prophet had enjoined. Okay? So one of the things that the descendant of Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir established was what we call the Sufi way. Okay? And these are some of the descendants who had established some of these Sufi ways. One of them was Muhammad al-Faqih al-Muqaddam. Okay? He established the Sayyid Sufi way. Sayyid is the titles that refer to the descendant of the Prophet. Okay? And then there's Abdurrahman al-Sagar, who created the ritual of Sufi Alawi complex. So this Sufi way and all this Sufi complex, there are many like ritual, prayers, litanies, something that we call ratib. The Muslim would be familiar with this, which are being read, being practiced even up to now all over the world. So it had been like for many thousands of years since this descendant of Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir created all this. Okay? And the last was Umar al-Mudar, who established the Nagdatul Ashraf, something like the brotherhood of the descendant of the Prophet, the brotherhood of the Sayyid. So with the establishment of the Sufi Alawi way, then the family tree is not only something that is patrilineal, because the genealogy, I guess, as most of the other races, are patrilineal. It shows the male descendants, of the family, but it also become something that is unveiling the genealogy of the Prophet itself, because in the family tree, then it will show people who establish all the Sufi ways just now, as I mentioned. Okay. So when descendant of Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir migrated to Hadramaut, they are also known as Hadrami Arabs. Okay? Some of you may heard of this famous research on Hadrami diaspora. Some of you may have heard of this. It's a research topic which is very popular among the Western universities that has the Middle Eastern studies. There are even like professors, doctors who study this body of research on Hadrami diaspora. They study on why there were many Hadramis who migrated out of Hadramaut all over the world. Okay, and this Hadrami diaspora, the people who are involved in the earlier period of the diaspora were mainly Arabs from the Alawi family. I will discuss later on why the reason that, many of them were from the Alawi family. Okay? So the Alawi family, as I mentioned, the Aljunied is one of the Arab surnames under this Alawi clan or Alawi family. Other surname that you may have heard of, like Alatas, Al-Kaf, Al-Sagaf, Al-Haddad. I know there's some Al-Sagaf here, even Al-Sri who are here. There are actually more than 100 over family surnames under this Alawi clan. So I'm going back to the main or the supra family tree again. Okay, let me see. So this is the main family tree. Okay. If you look at the top of the main trunk here, there is a split. So as I mentioned, the family tree, the genealogy now had become very structured, very systematic, very focused on, who the families are, from which family surname. So so where the descendants are from are also very important to the people. Okay. So at the top of the tree, you see the split here, to the right and to the left. Okay. To the right, this person here is the Muhammad Al-Faqih Al-Muqaddam, the one that I mentioned earlier. And from him, he's here, so from him, you see all the other descendants throughout the tree. And the other one on the branch on the left is Alawi bin Muhammad Sahid Marbat. So these two are important because the families before these two, there were not many who established the different surname. So after the descendants that come after these two persons are those with the many different surnames. So I could see from this huge supra family tree, we could tell which is the person who first started the Al-Sagaf surname, for example. Who has first started the Al-Haddad surname, for example. So like for the Aljunied surname is from the branch from the right side. The Al-Sagaf from the left side. Okay? We can look further later when I zoom in. Okay. So this is the family tree form which the genealogists had created, so that, as I said, above the two individuals just now, Alawi and Muhammad Faqih Al-Muqaddam, the descendant were fixed right up to the Prophet. Now I'm going into where the Aljunied family surname started. So again, back to the supra family tree. So the person here, I have zoomed in here, his name was Abu Bakr. So he was the one who chose to name his descendant Aljunied. So there will be others who have started to say that, okay, I want to name my family as Al-Sagaf or Al-Sri or Al-Haddad. Okay? And they are, of course, the reason that they have for naming their family with such name. For the Aljunied, Abu Bakar named the family, wanted to have the name Aljunied in conjunction with a famous religious leader and a mystic who lived in Baghdad. His name was Junaid al-Baghdadi. So he chose the name Al-Junaid in the hope that his descendant will be as pious as the saint. Okay. By the way, when the family name has the word Al or Al in front, in Arabic, Al means something that is specific. Yeah? So something like the, Junaid family, the Sagaf family. But some of the surnames that the Alawi family chose can start with other than Al. Like, for example, Ben Smith. If you know our former Mufti in Singapore, his surname was Ben Smith. Okay? So they are, but mostly would use the word Al in front and with the family name. Okay, so now that the genealogical text, all the family trees and all that had been kept and had been systematically structured by the Alawi family, so it becomes something that is, related to the religion itself, because in Islam, I guess in many other religion also, that there are people who you are not supposed to marry. So from the family tree, then you know who are the people that you can marry and you cannot marry. And in Islam also, the inheritance law is very specific. So to know that who will receive your inheritance, you also need to look at the family tree. So that's why the keeping of the family tree is very important. And lastly also, to know which relative, who are the relatives among you, especially for the men, that they have to look after. That's why some people sometimes question about the Islamic law of inheritance, because the male would get more than the female, than the ladies. But when they get more, it means that they have more responsibility. That's why they need to know that who are the people that they need to support. Like, for example, their aunties, their sisters. So if these women do not have anyone to support, let's say they don't have any more husbands or brothers, then these male would have to support these female relatives. So all this we know through the family tree. Okay. And remember I was saying about the Sufi way, how the members of the Alawi family had created, this systematic Sufi and the prayers, the litanies, the ratib. So the genealogy, also, the genealogical text also had become something that contained mysticism and stories. So there were stories about how pious this person is, how he had done something that is remarkable, and all this, the focal point is always Hadramaut, especially in the town or in the city like Tarim, Seyun, Ina. There are few cities where we can identify also where the each of the families come from. For example, like the Al-Sagaf would be from Seyun. The Aljunied would be from Tarim. Al-Kaf also from Tarim. And the Alatas from Inat. So there were specific, like so-called like villages where these families would come from. Okay. Now we look at the migration out of Hadramaut. I mentioned just now about the Hadrami diaspora. So these were part of the studies under the research on Hadrami diaspora. So most of the these Alawi Said or the Hadramis, they would migrated out to the west coast of India, and so that's where you find many Hadrami Arabs, and also to the east coast of Africa, like Tanzania, for example. I have like many distant relatives of Aljunied who are in Tanzania, and of course to Southeast Asia region, Indonesia, Malaysia, yeah, okay. So when these people travel out of Hadramaut, so this genealogy also travel with them, so-called travel with them. So when you look at the family tree, for example, then you will see that this person born in Tarim, then died in Singapore, or born in Singapore, died in Tarim, or born in Java, died in Tarim. So you see how these people move, from Hadramaut to other parts of the world. But from my research, I found out that especially our ancestors, maybe not the young Arabs now, but those who had Hadrami Arabs who had migrated out of Hadramaut, they always would have this intention that Hadramaut was still their homeland. So even if they had migrated to other parts of the world, one day they want to go back to their homeland, and maybe they want to, spend their last days in the homeland. Okay. Okay. Then most, maybe I touch first on the reason why some of these Hadrami Arabs move out from Hadramaut. Then most of these, as I said, they had the lineage that they can trace to Prophet Muhammad. So when they migrated out to countries, one of the reasons was to spread the religion of Islam. So when they were when they met the locals, for example, in some of the countries, then they were given special treatment by the locals and sometimes by the sultans. Like for example, the early Hadrami migrants that migrated to Indonesia, because to this part of Southeast Asian region, Indonesia has the longest history. So most of the Hadrami Arabs would migrate to Indonesia first. Even the Aljunied family, the first who came to Singapore, before they came to Singapore, they were in Palembang. And as I said, the first intention was to spread Islam, to do trading, and in Palembang, the Sultan, I think, accepted Islam in the late 18th century. Okay, and the Hadrami Arabs were the one who spread Islam to the Sultan. And during my visit to Palembang, when I was doing the research, they brought us to the mausoleum of the Sultan or other, mausoleum, and we could see that next to every grave of a Sultan, there would be a grave of what they call the teacher of the Sultan. So it seemed that whenever the Sultan has a prince, then he would invite, a Hadrami Arab to become the teacher of his son. And then when the teacher passed away, then they would put the grave next to each other, like in the picture. And also when the Sultan has a princess, there were some of the princesses that were married to the Hadrami Arab, and we know that at least two sultanates, which has a sultan who were Hadrami Arabs from the Alawi family. One was the bin Shahab Sultanate in Siak, Riau, to the north of Batam, and also the Sultan of the Pontianak Sultanate, who was from the Al-Qadri family. Okay, as many of the migration, even like the Chinese diaspora, the first to travel out were mainly male. So they did not bring their wife because it's like so difficult, take a long time to travel. But when they arrive at the country where they adopt, so there were intermarriages. Like just now, the marriage of the Sultan's children to the Arab families. So with the intermarriages, then the genealogy had become something that is a reference to what we call the kafa'ah rule. The kafa'ah rules in Arabic, or in terms of the Said family, is to see the compatibility of those you are marrying. Okay, but for the Alawi family, the kafa'ah rules is not two-way. Like for example, the Said are free to marry any woman, because remember the genealogy tree is patrilineal, so it's by the male, but not the female. So after the 20th century, okay, some of the migrants, the Hadrami Arabs that migrated to Southeast Asia, for example, they were from the non-Ba'alawi family. They were from what we call the Sheikh or the Irshad, or they call themselves the Irshadi group. So they started to migrate out of Southeast Asia. So this group then challenged the genealogy that has this kafa'ah rule, and then it started the struggle between the Alawi and the Irshadi group, especially in Indonesia, under the rule of the Dutch. So in 1928, the Arab Association of Indonesia, which is called the Rabita Alawiyah, was formed. And as part of this association, a department was established to look after the genealogy of the Ba'alawi. And this department is called the Alawiyin Statistical Center. So this center would receive requests, from families who can prove that they are from the Ba'alawi family, and then they will produce a family tree like this one, family tree posters like this, that I have brought here. So most of the Ba'alawi family then would have a big family poster like this, and they would put in their house. Okay, so this one, as I said, actually is my father's one, but at the end, he would put all his children's name, including his daughters. Okay, and the department also produced a family tree in passport format. It's like a small passport booklet with something like this also, the genealogy that goes right up to Prophet Muhammad. Okay. Part of the research on the Hadrami diaspora, as I mentioned, was to study on why these people move out of Hadramaut. As I mentioned just now, they wanted to spread Islam, but broadly the reasons can be grouped into two. One is what I call the push factor, and the other one is the pull factors. The push factor, like just now, the intention to spread Islam and also to do trading. And one reason is that Hadramaut is a place, the environment is very harsh. So it's difficult to make a living. So people want to then go out, to do trading and find better land where they can set up their living. Okay. And then part of the Hadrami diaspora study or research also look into assimilation. Whether these Hadrami Arabs, after they move to the new country, then how do they assimilate, to the locals? Do they try to become like the locals, forget about their identity, or they retain their identity? So these are the details that were part of the research. Okay, and also the situation in the countries that these Hadrami Arabs adopt, like for example Indonesia, Malaysia, and Singapore. You will see the different ways that these Hadrami Arabs live in this country. Indonesia, for example. As I said, they were the first Hadrami Arabs would migrate to Indonesia, but Indonesia was then under the Dutch. And of course, the Hadrami Arabs, as I mentioned, received special treatment, from the Sultan. So it was easier for them to do trading and to set up business. But of course, once you have the special treatment, you always have people who, would envy you and so on. But towards the end, where the locals were fighting to get their independence, so the Arabs who already had, made their living, already, rich traders. So they were helping the locals to fight the Dutch. So because of that, the Dutch had targeted the Arabs. So what did they do? The Arabs then, so-called, do not want to show that they were Arabs. So in terms of their names, they don't use the title like Sharifah or Said. They don't even put their family name, at the end of their name, because they do not want to be, to be then targeted by the Dutch because of being the Arabs, because of, helping the locals to get the independence. So they would the names would just be like my name would just be like Zahra. So if you see my first slide, my full name is actually Sharifah Zahra binti Said Junaid Aljunied. Very long, huh? So last time during exam also, every page I have to write my long name. Okay, and in Malaysia, the situation is a bit different, because in Malaysia there's also a reason where the Arabs do not really want to show that they were Arabs. So they would put they still put maybe, Sharifah or Said, but they do not put their family name, because they wanted to be known as Malays or as Bumiputra. Why? Because Bumiputra in Malaysia, they receive special treatment, right? So they wanted to be the Bumiputra so that they can get all these benefits. But in Singapore, because we are a society which is free, so we don't really try to hide, we being Arab. So we use our titles and also put in our surname. By the way, Syed and Sharifah, maybe I just want to clarify, to explain a bit. Maybe some of you were not sure about Syed and Sharifah, because if you have Arab friends, then you will see that their names, all their names started with Syed or started with Sharifah, right? And then some of you would call your friend then Sharifah. But so many Sharifahs, in the room. Like in my family, my name would have Sharifah, my mother's name would have Sharifah, my sister's name would have Sharifah, my grandmother's name also will start with Sharifah. So you don't call us Sharifah, because they'll be like, which Sharifah in the house? So Sharifah is just a title, that is given for the Alawi descendant, ladies, for ladies. And for the male, we use the title Said. Okay, it just means the noble one, something like that. Last time we used to use the term like Sharif, but this Sharifah and Said, they are only used by the Alawi descendant in this region, in Southeast Asia region. Like in Hadramaut, you don't have this term or this title Sharifah or Said before the name. of the male and female. Okay? You know why, right? Because when you migrated out, the same history like Ahmad bin Isa al-Muhajir. When he migrated out to a new place, then people are questioning your lineage, so you want to show that here's your lineage, by putting this title in front of your name. Okay? Okay. So that was my last slide to discuss on the Aljunied, the answer to what's behind the Aljunied name in terms of the Alawi genealogy. So for the rest of the slide, I will look into the, to answer the question in terms of my experience in tracing my family roots. It all started, I guess, if you have a family name that you share with an MRT station or a GRC or a school, then I would receive so many questions. People would say that, is Aljunied Road named after your father? Or did your father build the Aljunied school? So because of that, I had to then, to find out, what is the reason, so that I can give a proper answer to all these questions. Okay. Okay, so so that triggers my interest lah, of course. And the other one is about in the early 2000 when I was with NLB, and we had a project to set up an exhibition called Rihla, Arabs in Southeast Asia. So to do a research for that project, I went to Hadramaut for the first time. Okay. The story about going to Hadramaut, I always like to share this story because when we were young, our parents, our grandparents would always tell us that, hey, if you are naughty, you'll be sent to Hadramaut. I'm not sure whether the other Arabs here, their parents would have told them like that. Abdullah? No. But at least that's what I know. Because Hadramaut at that time, the place was still, backward. They were still very strict, especially for the ladies, because you cannot they're very strict with the ladies, being moving around, and then in terms of attire and all that. So we were told back then that if you're naughty, you'll be sent there. So something like you go there, you'll be in prison, But luckily nowadays it's not like that because we can travel freely and we know how is the situation there. Okay, so when I first visited Yemen or Hadramaut in 2004 to do the research, they were at least for the Aljunied family, it was it was a bit different because Aljunied, if we look from the Supra family tree just now, when Abu Bakar first named his family as Aljunied, it was way away from Prophet Muhammad. It's descendant was I think more than 30 generation. So because of that, the Aljunied family is not as big as Al-Sagaf, for example. Because Al-Sagaf, the person who first started to call the family Al-Sagaf was way above, nearer to the Prophet. So the family is big. I remember meeting a genealogist in Hadramaut who said that if you want to claim that you are from the Ba'alwi family, then you say that you are in Al-Sagaf. Because if you want to trace back, it will be a bit more difficult because the family tree or the tracing will be very complicated. So when I went there, then the relatives that I met, they would say that the Aljunied had migrated to this region for quite a long time. So there were not many things that I could find in Hadramaut as compared to the other family name. But the first of the Aljunied family who came to this region was Said Umar bin Ali Aljunied. I'm his sixth descendant. So before I look into detail on my family, I just want to share on the process when I start all this thing. Because as Mr. Ng said, that it's important, for all of us, especially to get the young to be interested, to know your family history. Not only like the dry subject of coming up with your family tree. I know Abdullah would carry a small notebook, and then whenever he meet people, he will then draw his family tree of the person. I mean the same as myself also. When you draw the family tree, then you would know the relationship of all these people, in the family. So being a librarian, of course, I started with doing the research at the library. But I guess for me, I was quite lucky because my ancestor is like quite famous. So there were a number of references in published books which I can find about him. Otherwise, if he's not that famous, then I would have to then look into primary resources like documents, from the archive, or from sometimes people look at records, immigration record, birth and death record. I know some of the members from the Genealogy Society also had shared with us how difficult it is to get some of the information about these old records in Singapore. I know that in libraries in the West, for example, they sometimes have a genealogical department where the staff would then help whoever want to find out about their genealogy. Then the library would liaise with all these other departments to get the details. But in Singapore, we haven't really gotten into that yet. I know there are some my former colleagues from NLB here. We can look into that matter, because it's really difficult to get information, of family records in Singapore. I can vouch on that. Okay. Okay. But the more important thing is to meet and talk to your family members. Okay, especially when we want to attract the young. Again, as Mr. Ng said, we have to get the young to start. Then when they are interested to find out all this information, the elders are still around. Even for me, I started quite late. Sometimes I regret that I did not ask, my mother or my grandmother or my, great-grandmother stories or things that I do not know about. Like, for example, who's the wife of my great-great-grandfather, because sometimes we see the names, we see photos, but they don't really look, like their fathers. And because, sometimes during those periods, husband would have more than one wife, so the children do not look the same. And remember, during those times also, you don't even have birth certificates. You don't even have marriage certificate. So all this you would know if you ask the elders, and they would say that, oh, I heard, from so and so this. Then you would record it. Okay. But I will share some of the documents that I had gathered from my research. All right. Okay. So as mentioned, the first Aljunied who came to Singapore was Syed Umar. He was born in Tarim. I remember I was saying about how the genealogy travel. He was born in Tarim, but he died in Singapore. And he had two brothers, Ahmad and Abdullah, who had never come to Singapore. He married another Alawi lady, Sharifah Alawiyah Al-Kaf. And their children, four daughters, not two, 4 daughters and the 5 sons were all born in Singapore. But some of them died in Tarim, some died in Mecca. Okay. This is a bit small, but can you see? Okay, my relationship with Syed Umar Aljunied was through my father. This is my father. My father and his mother, my paternal grandmother, Sharifah Hadijah, was the daughter of Said Umar's grandson and granddaughter. Okay, so Sharifah Hadijah's mother and father were both Said Umar's grandchildren actually. Okay, this Abdul Rahman, my great-grandfather, was the son of Junaid, and Junaid was the son of Umar. Okay, and his wife Alwiya was also grandson of Said Umar, because her father was Abu Bakar, and Abu Bakar was the son of Umar also, the brother of Junaid. This one I took from a genealogy website. I just want to mention a genealogy website which I subscribe to under My Heritage. There are many, I'm sure some of you also have subscribed to or have created your family tree in some of the online genealogy sites, because there are few like Genie, which you can do so easily. So Said Umar came to Singapore through Palembang, as I mentioned, together with his uncle, Said Muhammad. So they came around 1819, possibly in this kind of like ship, which is called a dhow, the kind of ship, that were made in the Middle East. And this could be their sea route, stop over India and then come to Palembang. Palembang is here to the northeast of Sumatra, which is like very near Singapore. Yeah, just to mention that last year we had published a book to commemorate the 200 years of the first prayer house in Singapore, which Said Umar built. And the book is called The Reverend Journey. You can have a look at the book. Yeah, this is the book. It will be on sale, at the end of the room later, if you are interested to have it. We have a history of the mosque as well as a history of the family. Okay. Okay. So remember, the Hajami Arabs from the Alawi family came to Indonesia first, and if you know the history of the colonial era in this region, the Dutch were, Indonesia was colonialized by the Dutch first, and then the British came. Basically, all were because of economic reasons lah. Okay, so Raffles, the Dutch were in Indonesia first. When Raffles came, of course, the British wanted to have, a part of the thriving economy that they have in this region lah. So Raffles, under the East India Company, whose office was in India, so try to find a place or try to find a port where the company can set up and then do their trading. I think the last before Singapore, he was setting up in Bencoolen, Raffles. Then of course they have some agreement with the Dutch and all that, but all were really not successful. So when Raffles opened Singapore, then all his bosses and all that in India, they were not really very eager to support Raffles to open Singapore. So that's part of the history of Raffles funding Singapore. So, but Raffles knew that to set up a port, a new country, of course you need capital and all that. But if you don't have support from your head office, then it's a bit difficult. So what Raffles did was he knew that the Arabs, remember we were saying that the Arabs received, the kind of like special treatment in Indonesia. So they were successful businessmen, they have all the capital. So Raffles, of course, wanted to attract all these Arabs to come to Singapore, bringing all their capital and then invest in the country. Okay, but Syed Muhammad, Syed Umar's uncle, came to Singapore with him. He died in Singapore in 1824. I just have this tombstone here because it's very rare. Even Syed Umar's tombstone is not like this design, because this tombstone design is exactly like what we have in Hadramaut. Although the material is different, because in Hadramaut they use mud brick, to build their house, even to make the tombstone. But this one is not mud brick. Even in Singapore, if mud break, then all the rain, it will just disintegrate. Yeah? So his son, Syed Muhammad's son, Syed Ali bin Muhammad Aljunied, was only 9 years old when his father passed away. So Syed Umar then had to continue to take on the trading of his uncle. So they traded in spices, but the one thing that I would say that has a link directly to my family is when Syed Umar ventured into textile. You see, when he came to Singapore, he of course has the good relationship with the British. Even when he asked for a plot of land to build his house, he asked for a land which is next to Farquhar's house, where the old Parliament, Singapore Parliament is. Then Raffles personally himself wrote a letter to tell Farquhar, to make sure that he get that land, for his house. So with that, then he started to venture into textile by importing fine white cotton textile from England. Why white cotton? Because as you know, the Arabs wear their long, what we call toque, in white, on white. And also the other reason is that after he imported this white cotton, he re-exported it to Indonesia. Where? To batik factories. As you know, batik factories use white cotton before they print, on their design and all that. And most of the batik factories in Indonesia were owned by the Arabs. So they have the network, they have the relationship, so that's what he did. And why I say it's like close to my heart, because my paternal grandfather also opened a batik shop, which is until now, since 1930s. So it's like a history repeating itself. And Syed Umar was like one of the first to invest in properties. In fact, there were many other Alawi family also invested in properties like the Al-Sagaf, the Al-Kaf. And one of the reason was that being Muslims, as you know, we cannot collect interest. So if you like spend your money into stocks, exchange and all that, there will be interest involved. So because of that, the safest is to buy properties, rent them out, and then collect the rent. So that is like a very, clear profit. Yeah? So because of that, when you come in to Singapore as with all the capital, and remember I was saying Raffles did not really get the support from the East India Company. So how did he then, try to get the money to develop the country? By selling off lands. So because Syed Umar, his house was near the city area, so he bought most of the land that were offered for sale around the old Singapore city area. If you see, I put there a boon or a curse. I will not answer here, I will answer later. A boon or a curse on why the Aljunied, properties were, mainly in the city area. Okay. So Syed Umar, as mentioned, was an honest businessman. So he contributed to charities and built the first mosque in Singapore, and also the land where the St. Andrew's Cathedral is standing now belonged to Syed Umar. I mean, the land he bought, from the British, but the story was that when Raffles, came to him to ask for the land, Raffles said, I want to build a prayer house in this land. He already got so many land, so he said, well, go ahead. and some of his Syed Umar's descendants also work with other communities, not even Muslim communities, like when his his cousin I mentioned just now, Said Ali bin Muhammad Aljunied, he leased out a huge portion of his land leased out to Tan Tock Seng. In fact, in the earlier Tan Tock Seng, or before that, it was called the Paupers Hospital, Syed Umar also gave the land where the Paupers Hospital was built. But when it was the new hospital, quite near to where we have now, it was Said Ali who leased out his land so that the Tan Tock Seng can collect, the proceed, the rent from this land, and then use the money for the operation of the hospital. So I have some of the reproduction of the documents that you can have a look later. It's called the Tan Tock Seng Said Ali land. Okay. So besides being a philanthropist, he is also a religious leader, and being close to the British, then he also represents not only the Arab community but the Muslim community when they have issues, that they want to bring up to the administration back then. Okay. Then, actually the best part of my journey to trace my route was a trip to Tarim, as I was mentioning. The first time I went was in 2004. And I stayed in this is our so-called ancestral home, built from mud brick that my ancestors built. My cousins and some of my relatives are still staying in this house. Okay, but if you know that there are many people, Chinese families who had approached the Genealogy Society of Singapore to trace their lineage, and usually they would then they must know where in China their ancestral home is. But in terms of in the case of the Alawi Arab families, in Hadramaut, we don't look for the ancestral home because there are many ancestral homes, but we look for the ancestral mosque because every family would have an ancestral mosque. The mosque where the family would lead the prayers there, would lead religious classes, So I have been to the ancestral mosque of the Aljunied family, but it is not called the Aljunied because it is like 2 generations up, which is called the Baharun, because the Baharun was like the ancestors of the Aljunied. In fact, if you look at that supra family tree, you can see the close relationship. Like for example, with the Al-Sri, I know that Al-Sri here, where Abu Bakar, who named the family Aljunied, his brother named his family Al-Sri. So if you go up the line, you will see that between Aljunied and Al-Sri, there. All of us, you can trace, you are like cousin, or don't know, only like how many times over. This is one way where if you subscribe to a genealogical website, you can tell, like you are the how many times cousin of this person or that person. Okay. So in Hadramaut, especially in Tarim, there are like more than 365 mosques. That's a place where I think in the world, between like in an area, there are the most number of mosques, So people say that you can pray in different mosques every day of the year. Okay? Yeah. And one thing that, remember I was saying just now, as part of the Hadrami diaspora, they study about the influence or the effect that the Hadrami Arabs have on the local. But when I went to Tarim, I found something like, I would say, culture shock. Because, especially their food. If you look at this picture, the food, they eat rice. But most of the Arabs in the region, they eat bread. But in Tarim, no, they eat rice. And then you see the end there, there's keropok. Keropok. Every meal there will be keropok. And then they have rojak. They even have belacan. Because remember I was saying how the genealogy become like travel with them. So people like born in Tarim then die in Indonesia, then they go back to Hadramaut. So it's like some of these were of course imported from Southeast Asia. Even my own experience, because my paternal grandfather was born in Tarim, then came to Singapore to marry my grandmother. So he still had that time his sisters, his relative in Tarim. So every now and then I would see my grandmother would have like a box, a big box. Some of you have maid, the maid would send in their things in a big box, right? TKI or whatever. So it's like that. So they will have like a big box, and then my grandfather will buy a lot of things like, including keropok, belacan, even the lempok durian was also a favorite. Also a favorite. So it's like after that, my grandmother would like use like cloth to tie and then send, of course, by ship lah. That will take ages, to reach Tarim. And in other aspect, like for example, language, there are many like vocabulary or terms that were used in Tarim that's not found, is not used in other parts of Middle East. Like for example, iron. Okay, iron. When you iron your clothes, iron in Arabic, other parts of Middle East also they call mikwah. Okay, but in Tarim they call it setrika. Those who know Malay, setrika. Setrika is the Malay word for iron, iron clothes. So that's so it's like not only that they influence us, but we also influence them in many ways. Okay, so that was as I said, one of the thing that how to say, it's something like opened my eyes when I first traveled to Tarim. But the thing is, I always wonder, even when I was going to Hadramaut that time, it was not easy. We have to go to so many places. The last time I went was before the war. Then we would go to either Dubai or Qatar, for transit, and then we go to Sana'a. Sana'a was an international airport in Yemen, which is at the northern Yemen. I remember I was saying northern Yemen is the place where they have all the war. So since the international airport was closed, so it was now more difficult to go to Hadramaut. Until recently, they opened the local airport. The local airport then is easier to go either from Cairo or from Dubai or from Jordan. Okay, but it always struck me then with all our ancestors who had migrated from Hadramaut, how they travel, for months, in ship, for months in ship. And one of the, okay, maybe I just show you later of my finding. Okay. So for months, and we have proof that I have seen in the manuscript library in Tarim, where these Hadrami Arabs, when they travel, for months in ship, then they would copy, religious document or religious book. They copy. And in that manuscript library, there were like cupboards of like, okay, this is like the collection of the Al-Sagaf family, and this is the collection of the Al-Kaf family, and this is the collection of the Aljunied family. They were all manuscripts that were copied and written by these, migrants who moved out of the Hadramaut. Okay, now I want to answer. What was the question just now? I haven't answered. Who remembers? Yes. Whether it's a boon or a curse. So I'm going to answer now. Okay. You see, these are the samples of the kind of documents. Some were, handwritten that I found mainly from my paternal grandfather's collection, because he took over from his father-in-law to look after the Wakaf properties. You're familiar with Wakaf? You're familiar with Wakaf? Okay. Wakaf is you see, in Islam, you can Wakaf or bequeath. Okay, we can bequeath the property for either for the general public or to your family. Okay, so you can put in your will that, okay, I bequeath this property to my children, for example. So whatever, then of course the property would have to be rented out, then all the proceeds you would distribute to the beneficiaries following the will. Okay, and even up to now, like I was mentioning about the mosque just now, there are properties that had been bequeathed from many generations ago, and the proceeds would still be given to the mosque or to the school or even to the families. So the person can also bequeath to say that, okay, every year the proceeds from my Wakaf properties you give to a descendant so that they can perform the pilgrimage, for example, or you can give as a scholarship or as whatever that is mentioned. Okay, so my paternal grandfather was one of the we call mutawali, or the trustee, who look after the Wakaf property. Yeah, Abdullah is one of them. Yeah, Abdullah Al-Sagaf, my friend. He's looking after the Al-Sagaf property that had been wakaf by the ancestors. Some was like, hundreds of years ago, but still, being benefited by the family. So a number of the document that I got from his collection, some like this one, as old as 1830s, very old document. And what are this document? All about list of properties, and sometimes because of the family had moved back to Tarim, for example, and then when the family died, then you have to show proof that the family had died. So the beneficiaries would go to his children. So all this you need the proof, documental proof. But one of the letter that I found is this. This letter was dated 1954, was sent by the Land Acquisition Department to my grandmother, Sharifah Hadijah Aljunied, and the letter said that the Land Acquisition wanted to acquire her land in this Mukim for the purpose of building a public library and community center. And that Mukim shows, you guess where was it? Where was it? No, the old library at Stamford Road. So the old library at Stamford Road, that was part of the land, that because my grandmother was the great-granddaughter of Said Umar. So imagine he had bought those land, and then after that, of course, break down and then, pass down to his descendant. So that's why I said is a boon and a curse. A boon because Syed Umar's house along the first house along Arab Street and along High Street and Hill Street, you know, that huge piece of land, when it was sold, it was like that time, you know, early 1900, it was at nearly 1 million because it was near the city area, so the land value was high. But also after the land acquisition law was established, then most were then acquired because you need those land in the city area for the to build up for the public purpose. Okay, so that's the answer. Okay, the other interesting finding, which I have the reproduction here also, is this genealogical text which was created, I don't know how to say, drawn or written, but it was so beautiful, that was created by my maternal grandfather. He was the genealogist. As Mr. Ng says, every family would have a genealogist to look after the family history. So in my part, Syed Ahmad bin Muhammad Aljunied was one of the family genealogists. So imagine the last time we don't have printing, not like this, you know, family tree poster where you can pay a certain amount and then you get the Alawi Statistical Center in Jakarta to print for you. But before this, they have to write like this. And for this one, the family tree has females. This is the first, like in the Alawi family tree, that include female, and with all the notes, like this little note that says that this person, you know, is the wife of this, and these are her children, and even like where they live also, it was mentioned there. And this was handwritten by my maternal grandfather, and the tree goes right all the way to the first human being, Prophet Adam. You can have a look at later that. So this is like, I think, one of my precious, you know, finding. And his father was also a genealogist because he took over from his father. And I also found, but this one is not a complete set because the physical family tree was in Indonesia, and I couldn't manage to get it over. So I just had a sample of the few pages of the tree. And this one, I think, like even more amazing because this is just an example of 2 pages. You see, like one page where when he wrote down the names, you know, of the people in the tree, then it looks like bird. And then the one on the left, it looked like a sheep. And for every other page, it's like a different, you know, a different kind of illustration. And this was created in Singapore in the year 1870. Because usually at the end of a manuscript, whoever created the manuscript would write, you know, when he finished writing and what is the date. Okay, now I just want to touch some of the challenges that I face, especially in tracing my roots of the Alawi family, because we were from Tarim, from Hadramaut. So of course, all materials, they were in Arabic, and that is a language which I'm familiar but not so familiar with, but I still can get by lah. Yeah? And for a genealogist, it's not only that the family tree that they refer to, but the basic, you know, the basic records of the family comes in multiple volumes. I have seen this because the current genealogist for Singapore and Malaysia is my brother-in-law, Syed Umar Al-Shatri, who's residing in KL, and he has, every genealogist would have that. I think 30 over volumes like this, and then inside were handwritten, you know, all the trees, and I would say that, okay, this one, then would then refer to another. Because even in Tarim now, duty of a genealogist is to record of course, the male family members only lah. So in Tarim, I have seen in the manuscript library where this person who is, sitting, in front of a huge table with a huge book, and then people would, whenever there's a male baby, being born, then they would come to this person, to record. I have this boy who's just been born, so he will record it there. Yeah. But nowadays, it's just that if you are particular about the genealogy, then you will inform the genealogists. Okay. Then the other challenge is that because there's so many linking like this, so you need to, of course, for us, you think that use computer lah, then can help you, right? But not really, because from my experience lah, but at least some of the genealogical website now had been improved lah. Because if you know that the genealogical website usually use this software which is called GetCom, genealogical, where it helps, to create trees, to link up and all that. But the problem with the Alawi family is that first we always like to use the same names, of your ancestors. If you notice just now, right? So Umar, and then you have Umar again, you have Muhammad, everywhere, So sometimes and then also to keep the family tree, to keep the family together, sometimes people usually would marry cousin. So sometimes you have like that when you want to link up, in the online genealogical site is a bit difficult, like that. I have seen in Tarim, when I met the genealogists, I have seen a family tree of the Belfageh. This is also a group under the Alawi family, Belfageh family. The person's family tree only consists of 2 names. So Muhammad bin Abu Bakar, Abu Bakar bin Muhammad, Muhammad bin Abu Bakar, all the way out. And they say that, no, you cannot break this chain. You must always, if Abu Bakar has a son, must name him Muhammad, at least one lah. And if Muhammad has a son, must name him Abu Bakar. But of course, people in Tarim always have nickname, or what they call lagab, or your nickname lah. Then of course you don't have that problem. But then you imagine then a genealogical software will find it an issue because of this. Okay, so this will be my last slide. So we have seen that, from the first person who migrated to Hadramaut, and then his descendant, build up what we call the Alawi family. So most of the descendants now are away from what we call the homeland or the Hadramaut. Okay, and in fact, if you look at where the Alawi descendants are now, most of them are now in Palembang. If you go, how many of you have gone to Palembang? Any of you have gone to Palembang? No. Okay. If you go to Palembang, I think you may know that the main river in Palembang is called the Musi River. Remember the Silk Air, the Silk Air tragedy that went down to Musi River. So on one side of the Musi River, there were series of villages, and all these villages are called Kampung Arab, or the Arab Kampung. So you have the Al-Kaf Kampung, Asagaf Kampung, Al-Idros Kampung, but no Aljunied Kampung. That is another story. So the number of the descendant of the Alawi now, the most number are found in Palembang, not even in Hadramaut now. Okay, so that's just my feeling of tracing my roots, because when you go to Tarim and then you look at the old your ancestors' house, And then if you reflect back, on how your ancestors, had done, in fact, like you have seen, Syed Umar, as I said, when he was here, he was a philanthropist. He worked with the British, he worked with the Chinese, to help to set up the nation. Okay, I think I shall end there so that later you have the time maybe to come forward and look at some of the documents. Thank you for your attention.
You want to have Q&A?
Sorry?
You want to have Q&A?
Yeah. I think.
Okay,
I have a question.
maybe we have just
I think got
time
one
for
question.
maybe 10 minutes of Q&A. And if you want to ask,
I'm here already.
we've got
She
I'm
already
already
stand
here.
there.
yeah, okay.
Okay, I have a question. A question on genealogy. My name is Vidya. I'm a docent at National Museum and Indian Heritage Center. So the genealogy question I have is that when the Arabs came to this part of the world, like we see inside Omar, it is clear that he had an Arab wife, which he probably got from Palembang itself, or did he get her from Hyderabad? Okay, that's a question. And so my question to that is, when did they start to marry people from this region, the Malays and the Indonesians? And did they also marry the Hadramuts that had already established themselves in Kerala? You mentioned western coast of India, that's called Kerala. The Kerala Muslims also have descendants of the Hadramut. Did the Arabs of Palembang, Singapore, Malaya start to marry the Hadramuts from Kerala, and did they start to get married here? Like, what is the genealogy as a mixed genealogy? That is question one. And question two is, today the Arab person in Singapore, how distinguishing are they from the rest of the Muslim community in Singapore? Other than the faith, are there other things that assimilate, that make you all different? The similar things we know. What is making you all different? Thank you.
That is like one research question under Hadrami diaspora. You need an expert. I'm not an expert, but I just try to explain. As I was mentioning just now, after the migration, there were a lot of intermarriages, especially the male Hadrami Arab or the Alawi Arab married the local Malays. And yeah, as you said, it could be, there are many stories that I heard where the brides were so-called imported, from Palembang to Singapore. It is easier to import from Palembang than from Hadramaut because there may be language barrier, but from Palembang it is not. And there may, like in my paternal grandmother's case, my paternal grandfather was so-called imported from Hadramaut, to marry my grandmother in Singapore. And as a question of when, I mentioned just now, even like in the 1700, in Palembang, the sultans married their princesses, to the Hadrami Arabs. So it is not, it's not impossible that, the Hadrami Arabs who migrated to Palembang also marry the locals, in local Malays in Palembang. And what's the other question? Oh yeah, the similarities. Okay, as I mentioned, that is a research topic under Hadrami diaspora, whether you assimilate or whether you retain your identity, in different cases, different ways, different countries, different communities. But, and that also then leads to your next question, what is the similarity and what's the difference? Because in some communities where the Arabs then try to retain their identity, then they may be like even a simple thing like food, clothing, which will be different from the other Muslim in that region, and otherwise, I mean, I've also seen where, let's say, Arab men who married non-Arab, let's say Malays, a Malay woman, then they don't like maybe, I mean, the family then do not even follow any of the Arab, practices. So it varies. It's not something which is common, everywhere. Does it answer your question? You want to go to the mic? Huh?
Sorry, I find your question very interesting. I just some pointers which I
Maybe,
learned.
sorry, maybe introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name is Jamal Al-Sagaf. Actually, I'm from the Al-Sagaf family, but my wife is Aljunied, actually her first cousin. So I'm very quite. Yes. Huh? Yeah. No, your point about Kerala, actually from Yemen, from Hadramaut, we have they have traveled to Kerala long time ago, well before they came to
This
Singapore.
region.
Singapore was the later part. Singapore was in the 17th, Indonesia 17th century, Singapore 18th century. But Kerala, they were there. The Al-Idros.
Maybe.
That's not from Hadramaut. That was what spread of Islam. But later on from Hadramaut, they went. Al-Idros and three of them went. So that they were there, Keralas, and the site they have a name, special name. So that's why in what you call it in India, most of them are Hanafi, but in Kerala they are Shafi'i because from Hadramaut. So and descendant of Prophet, a lot of them in. So the other point you brought, which is very interesting, you see. Who did they marry? They cannot bring their wives from Hadramaut. That was totally, So what happened? The earlier Arabs, so what happened when they marry, their offspring hybrid. Hybrid. Non-Arabs. So the male Arabs will marry the local Arabs, the Said and Sharifah. That's very, very easy. What about the Sharifah? So if I have Syed Umar, okay, I give you a specific example, Syed Umar. Syed Umar came from Palembang. So he had his wife, Sharifah Alwiya Al-Kaf. This information I got from actually Sharifah Zahra. So his uncle, who
Syed
came,
Muhammad.
married the sister of Syed Umar. So you have this. So they have children. Their children marry each other. Most of them. So Syed Umar had 3 daughters. Actually, 4 daughters. All of them married first cousin. So he got his brother's son to marry. One of them is her great grandfather, Ahmad. So that's how. So for the woman, they will get the cousin. For women, they will get their nephew. With family, and usually it's the cousin. And then for my friend Haidar here, he's also actually a family Al-Sri in Singapore. Most of the Al-Sri, 95% of the Al-Sri are from Syed Umar Aljunied, from the daughter. So from the daughter, Zainah binti Umar. So Zainah binti Umar married an Al-Sri. So I was asking them, I told them, I'm 100% sure that he would got his sister's son to marry with his daughter because of the wealth and all that lah. And then you have Said Ali's children, and this is recorded. This is not speculation. There's proof. There's documents I've gone through. Married each other. So Ali's daughter, they married each other. So, but you see how it devolves. They will not get from Hadramaut. Yeah. Same with the Al-Sagaf family. So Al-Sagaf family, Abdullah knows. So the Al-Sagaf family, the Al-Sagaf, we are in Singapore. We were in Malaysia well before Singapore was founded. So Syed Ahmad bin Abdurrahman, he had, I think, 7 daughters, 1 son. So you have big problems. So who are you going to get your daughters married? So it is very wealthy. So what happened? They import their relatives from Hadramaut, from Indonesia. I use the word import to marry, and usually marry first cousin or second cousin or third cousin. So that's the point. Just last point before I just want to add about what Zahra said about Tarim and Seyun. We Al-Sagaf, we are from Seyun. It's not far. It's about half an hour.
Half-hour drive.
So there's quite a different as far as food is concerned. she has her grandfather has first wife in Hadramaut, second wife in Singapore. My grandfather, first wife in Hadramaut, second wife in Singapore. So we are. Yes, we have different set of children. So I have aunties there. I've visited a few years, a long time. She has an uncle there. Had an uncle pass away lah. So when it comes to food, it's different. Comes to food, very specifically, very interesting. The Alkaf, they were here. Syed Sheikh Alkaf, the one who and his brother made the money. So his children all born in Singapore. All these children born in Singapore.
Okay.
So he decided
sorry.
Yeah,
John,
1 minute. 1 minute.
Because I need them
Yeah.
at least have time to look
Yeah,
at
one minute. Just to finish this.
We have to.
So he migrated back to Tarim, brought his children, they were young. But he did not only migrated back, he brought all the servants, all the entourage. So that's why the food there, they ate belacan, they had the whole support base lah. Okay, sorry.
It's okay.
Thank you for your contribution. Yeah. Just one note, our Babas also did the same thing. We also married cousins and also eat a lot of belacan. Okay, well, we've come to the close of this very interesting talk. We are going to have a group photograph of the family, and after that you can inspect some of the documents there, and if you want to buy some of the books, they're over the other side. Okay, may I just invite you all to take a photograph with Zara?
I think you just remain where you are.
Yeah.
Remain where you are. I will stand here.
Okay.
Then we will have a group photo.
Okay, very
You may want to come nearer to the center. Mr.
Yeah.
Okay. Or you want to stand up or sit down? Stand up nicer. Okay. Anyway, this is my son. He said stand up or sitting down? Okay, sit down. Okay, can. Who else? KK?